to another episode of The Racing Report. My name is Rob Peeters, and I'm so glad you've decided to tune in for another fabulous little half hour where we're going to talk all things motorsports because, boy, there's no shortage of news in this week's show. A lot of stuff going down, especially in the world of IndyCar. Kind of some of that trickles down into the world of F1 as well. Also, we've got NASCAR lawsuit updates. We had a big bombshell drop on Thursday of last week that we've got to get to. Came out after we'd already recorded last week's show. So now we've got to recap all of that and get you into it. So we'll just go ahead and get it all into that coming up here later on in the show, so don't miss that. But before we go ahead and start our news segment of the show, I will go ahead and remind everybody, if you like the show, please do follow me on social media. You can do so by looking up at rpeeters33. That's RPEETERS 33. And then make sure to always have that trusty, handy-dandy little WTHR Plus app installed on your smart TV so you can get brand new episodes of the Racing Report as soon as they are available. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right on into the Formula One news of the week. It's official. Colton Herta has been named Cadillac F1's test driver for 2026. This means he will leave IndyCar. He will not compete next year in the IndyCar series, and it is likely that he will race in Formula 2, though as of the recording of this episode, that has not yet been confirmed by anybody. It's just heavily assumed that that's probably what's going to happen. Obviously, this is a big deal for Colton, trying to get those super license points to make him eligible to be the next American Formula One driver. Obviously, right now he doesn't have the amount of super license points that he needs in order to get a super license to race in Formula One. That's all very complicated and whatnot, but like I just said, a Formula 2 ride could very well help him accomplish that, especially if he finishes high enough in that championship. Now, if this, again, also hasn't been confirmed, but it's heavily rumored that with Colton Herta's move to F2, I believe I've heard rumors that he could be linking up with Prema, which, if you are familiar with Formula One feeder series, you know that Prema is a very dominant force in those series. If you're familiar with Formula 2, Formula 3, Formula Regional, all the way down Formula 4, all of that stuff, Prema is the team you want to drive for. If you have the means, if you have the money, you want to try and get yourself on a Prema squad, if at all possible. Obviously, I know a lot of IndyCar fans might know Prema for their debut season in the series this year, but Prema has a very, very storied history in the world of feeder series, and that could be a very good landing spot for Colton Herta, but it will be a very massive learning curve for him to undertake as he goes to Europe next year. And we'll get to who his replacement is coming up here later on in the show when we get to the IndyCar news, so stay tuned again for that. Meanwhile, as we move on to our next piece of Formula One news, Toto Wolff has said that he doesn't anticipate any changes to Mercedes' lineup for next year, indicating that George Russell and Kimi Antonelli are expected to remain in the Silver Arrows for next year, despite not having any contract extensions reported or confirmed whatsoever as of right now. So, even though we don't know for sure whether or not those contract extensions have been signed, Toto Wolff says we're probably not going to change up our lineup for next year. So you could kind of pencil in George Russell and Kimi Antonelli in next year's Formula One grid, alongside, as we talked about last week, Sergio Perez and Valtteri Bottas for Cadillac F1. Now into the next piece of Formula One news today. Alpine Executive Director Flavio Briatore admitted to the media over the weekend that the team might have put a little bit of too much pressure on Franco Colapinto after he replaced Jack Doohan after the Miami Grand Prix, adding that Briatore thinks that Colapinto might have been promoted from reserve driver to a race driver just a bit, quote, too early. So you do see Alpine kind of understanding and recognizing that, yeah, Colapinto was probably going to struggle given where he was. Obviously, I think the Alpine is maybe not the best handling car compared to maybe the Williams. The Williams might not be fast, but I think it might handle a little bit better than the Alpine. But even then, we have at least some team executive saying, yeah, we might have done this a little bit too quickly and hastily. But meanwhile, speaking of teams that do things a little bit too quickly and hastily, Red Bull team principal Laurent Mekies says the team is not quote not in a hurry to confirm its 2026 lineup. However, there are reports out there indicating that Red Bull have given Yuki Tsunoda until, quote, around the Mexico City Grand Prix to prove himself to this team, to whether or not he will remain as Max Verstappen's teammate for next year. So it looks like they're, like I said, they're not in any hurry, but hey, by some point when we get down to here coming to 3, maybe 4 races left in the season, they'd like to kind of have an idea of what Tsunoda can probably bring to the table. So we'll just have to really watch that. Obviously, Tsunoda's been still kind of struggling. This current Red Bull is not maybe as good. We saw Isaac Hadjar get a podium this past weekend in Zandvoort. That's his first podium, going alongside Max Verstappen, who finished second. I'm very curious to see. I don't think that promoting Hadjar this early again is the right way, or even demoting Tsunoda. But I talk a little bit more about that in my own podcast, Racing with Rob and Roller, which you can look up on your own time, anytime you want. We are available on all the major podcast platforms. So anywhere you get your podcast, you can go ahead and look up Racing with Rob and Roller, and you can hear my opinion on what I think Red Bull should do for next year. Now, that said, let's go ahead and move on into the IndyCar news, because I teased who's going to replace Colton Herta at Andretti Global for next year. Well, we know who that's going to be, because Will Power announced that he will not return to Team Penske in 2026, instead opting to move to Andretti Global to drive that number 26 Gainbridge Honda in place of Colton Herta beginning next year. Now, this is big news, because there was a Speed Cafe article actually that I read today where Will Power basically said, hey, he told Tim Cindric last year, or excuse me, at the end of 2024, that he wanted a contract extension, and they said that they would talk during the offseason to 2024 and 2025, and apparently that never happened. And now after Tim Cindric was let go from the team, however you want to see it, the team just never offered a contract extension to Will Power. Apparently, there was actually an opportunity for him to maybe take a 1-year extension, but he ended up declining it. And I guess according to that, he made his decision after Portland when he won that race. He decided it was time for a change. And he then also later revealed that despite what we talked about earlier a couple of weeks ago when we were discussing what Power's future might be, he also revealed that apparently Team Penske did allow him to start talking to teams as early as July of this year. And it seems like he reached out to Dan Tauris of Andretti Global and asked him, hey, I'd like to drive for your team. Tauris said, well, we don't have any space available for you right now, but let me see what I can do. Little did he know, Colton Herta was going to make that move to become Cadillac F1's test driver, which offered a perfect slot open for Power to take over the 26. So that's kind of how some of those dominoes fell in the IndyCar silly season. But that's not over. The IndyCar silly season, by all means, is not over, because we also learned that Rinus VeeKay will not return to Dale Coyne Racing next year, and because it's heavily rumored right now. These are the rumors that are going on. So now that we know that Power's leaving Team Penske, going to Andretti, now that we know that Herta is going to become the F1 test driver for Cadillac F1, it's highly rumored that David Malukas is leaving AJ Foyt Racing to take over the 12 car that has been vacated by Will Power. Now, because that has basically been in the works, the dominoes have fallen, Rinus VeeKay said, hey, I've got a better opportunity. And a lot of people within the paddock are pointing to that opportunity as being the number 4 AJ Foyt Racing car. Now, if that's the case, if that ends up being true, that Malukas does go to Team Penske and VeeKay takes over the 4, that means that there will be 2 entries open next year at Dale Coyne Racing, because also it is expected that Jacob Abel will not be retained by the team either. So, that being said, it looks like, according to a racer report from Marshall Pruitt, who talked to Dale Coyne, it looks like Coyne is reportedly eyeing Roman Grosjean, who drove for the team when he first came to IndyCar back in 2021. That looks like a very strong possibility, because Grosjean has been on the sidelines basically all year. He's been the reserve driver for Prema, but he had never got in a car, and he doesn't like being on the sidelines. He moved his whole family over here to the United States for a new opportunity to race in IndyCar, and he was left without a ride last year. So he's been working really hard behind the scenes to get a deal together to go back racing in IndyCar, and it looks like that might fall into place now with Dale Coyne. Now, here's the other thing. Dale Coyne has also said, basically, since that partnership with Rick Ware Racing is done and dusted, it's gone, it's no longer, they're going to take that number 51 car, renumber it back to number 19, and the likely candidate for that could be Indy Next champion Dennis Hauger under an agreement with Andretti Global. Now, obviously, since Andretti's got 3 cars that are now taken, with obviously Will Power going to the 26, there's no room for Dennis Hauger. But Andretti still thinks that he's ready for IndyCar. Obviously, being the Indy Next champion means you get that scholarship money to run IndyCar races beginning the next year. So it's very likely that we could see a deal worked out where Dennis Hauger races at least one season with Dale Coyne Racing, possibly at that number 19, under a partnership with Andretti Global. But again, none of that has been announced. Those are just rumors. But that is what Racer has reported, and basically what Dale Coyne, who usually will give it to you straight, that's what he's looking at for right now. So that's what you could be expecting coming up here in the next couple of weeks. It's just a matter of when are these silly season dominoes going to fall, when are the announcements going to be made, and when are these rumors going to become fact. Now let's move on into the final piece of IndyCar news, because this was also announced over the weekend. News. I know. All of this is so much to take in. But the Indy Toronto will move to a new 2.19-mile, 12-turn circuit in Markham, which is a suburb about 45 minutes north of Toronto. Now, this is due to, obviously, Exhibition Place's role in the FIFA World Cup next year. But the announcement today kind of indicated and seemed to confirm, at the very least, that this is permanent. This move is not just because of the World Cup. This will end a 40-year tradition of the series going to Exhibition Place and racing around the streets of Toronto. So this has been announced as a multi-year deal with this new Markham circuit, which, again, is in a suburb north of Toronto. It's not in downtown Toronto. It's in a suburb of Toronto. So it's hard to describe here, but let's say hypothetically you're watching this from Indianapolis. Let's say hypothetically you had a street race around the streets of downtown Indianapolis that had existed forever, and then suddenly the promoters decided we're going to take the series and we're going to go to Westfield. That's kind of what's happening here, to put things into perspective. And so it's a really, really interesting move here, but this appears to be the permanent future for the IndyCar series racing in Ontario for the near future, for at least the indefinite future now. So definitely some big news there. It's kind of disappointing now looking back on that Toronto race, just how kind of crazy and fun it was to sit there and realize that was the last time we'll ever see Indy cars going around the streets of Exhibition Place. Hopefully it's a never say never kind of thing, but based on today's announcement, I think that could be a thing of the past now. So anyway, on that note, we've got to take our first break of the show. But when we come back, we're going to go ahead and recap some of the NASCAR news. And we've got some big news regarding a NASCAR driver doing a Supercars race coming up here in a couple of months' time. So stay tuned for that and don't go anywhere, because you are watching The Racing Report. And welcome back to the Racing Report. My name is Rob Peeters. I'm so glad you stuck through us with that little commercial break. But now we're back. We're going to talk about some Supercars news that has broken today. It's official now. Austin Cindric is indeed going to race the Adelaide Grand Final coming up here November 28th through the 30th. That will be the final Supercars race of the year. It will also be the culmination of their now finals/playoffs kind of championship crowning deal. The Adelaide Grand Final, obviously, it will be determined over the course of 3 races. But regardless of your feelings on how motorsports playoffs should or shouldn't be happening, Austin Cindric is finally going to be racing a supercar down there on the streets of Adelaide. He will be joining the Tickford Racing Team, driving a Ford in their wild card entry. Don't know the number, don't know the sponsor, don't really know any of the details right now, but what we do have confirmed right now is that Austin Cindric is fulfilling what he says is a childhood dream. So some very good news there for Austin Cindric being able to run some at least three Supercars races coming up later on this year. Because remember, the Cup Series season ends in the first weekend in November, but Supercars still has some time before they crown their champion. So that is perfect opportunity for Cindric to be able to get down there and run some races. So kind of cool, like I've been mentioning. NASCAR's been poaching a lot of Supercars stars, and a lot of Supercars drivers have been doing some one-off races in NASCAR, and now we finally get to see the tables turned and see a NASCAR driver go down under and run a Supercars race. It's kind of cool there too, as well, to grab a Daytona 500 winner. I know, obviously the plans to have Kyle Larson and Kyle Busch go down there, both NASCAR champions, go down there, fell through. But still, to get a Daytona 500 winner down there, I think that's pretty impressive. That's still something to be very happy about if you are a Supercars fan. And something else to be happy about if you are a Supercars fan is we got our first look at the new for 2026 Toyota Supra Supercar that will be racing beginning next year. Walkinshaw Andretti United took that thing out for a spin this week. Boy, it sounds cool. It looks cool. It looks fast. I'm super excited. It's probably one of the coolest looking Supercars I've seen, especially with this Gen 3 regulations. Not to say that the Mustang and the Camaro aren't cool in and of themselves. They do look cool. They are aesthetically pleasing. But man, there's something about this Supra that just looks mean and fast, and I'm excited to see that thing running around next year on the Supercars. I'm excited to see what happens next year when they take it to Bathurst. That'll be really cool for sure, because Bathurst 1000. What am I talking about? Bathurst 1000 is coming up here in about a couple months' time. So really looking forward to that. We'll probably see some more test runs, maybe some test laps going around there as we get closer to that with that Toyota Supra. But remember, that is coming next season in Supercars, and boy, does it look cool. So some cool news there for Supercars fans down under. But let's take you into the world of NASCAR news now here real quick, because we do have a lot to get to, and there's a lot to go through, especially regarding this lawsuit. So the 2311 and FRM versus NASCAR antitrust lawsuit, that got pretty ugly last week after the discovery hearing revealed some texts between NASCAR executives and the teams, not necessarily to one another, but within their own little groups there. So here's some of the big key points to keep in mind, and I highly recommend reading Matt Weaver's article on motorsport.com. He breaks it down probably the best, I think, of anybody. Not to say that all the other reporters didn't break it down well, but I think Weaver's story kind of breaks down everything that you need to know, and I'm going to kind of try and summarize some of those points here for you. But really, if you're still kind of lost, I highly recommend reading that article, because it is very, very informative, especially to tell you what went down during that hearing on Thursday. But first, obviously, there were some very spicy NSFW texts from Michael Jordan and towards the teams and towards NASCAR, and basically saying, hey, I'm willing to burn as much money as I need to in order to win this lawsuit. And it seems like he said he's lost more money at a casino than he's spending now. So clearly, he's willing to burn even more money to prove his point. But something else that was really damning and very concerning is some of the things that NASCAR had to say. Obviously, there were things from the teams that maybe didn't look very good as well. They do look kind of scorned and upset, but I think they have a reason to be. But it's the things that NASCAR said that really, I think, shift the court of public opinion further towards 2311 and FRM. Obviously, you're entitled to your own opinion. I don't care how you feel one way or the other. I'm just going to tell you what was said and what most people are thinking or saying and whatnot. So, but here's the big thing that we need to understand. This is what NASCAR was revealed in these hearings to have said or texted or emailed at some point. So NASCAR President Steve O'Donnell allegedly said, quote, F the teams. I censor myself there, obviously. Whereas Commissioner Steve Phelps said something along the lines of there would be no wins for the teams. Obviously, that no wins thing is still a little bit ambiguous. It's not exactly clear what he meant by that. But That's kind of how it's been interpreted, at least. It still could be a little bit wrong there. Not really 100% sure, but kind of take that for face value at least. But something else that was really damning was this revelation that NASCAR apparently has this, quote, gold rule in which in the event of a split like CART IRL in 1995-6, the series would then own and operate all of the cars themselves and select which drivers to pilot them. Wow. Okay, so that's a way of them saying we don't need the teams. Who needs the teams? The teams don't matter. We can always do this. We can always just be SRX or IROC or whatever. That's very concerning given what, all of these teams have done for NASCAR and the fact that NASCAR really kind of wouldn't exist without these teams, but NASCAR's saying, no, we would exist without these teams. Would it be as popular, though? Maybe. Anywho, moving further along into that, in addition to that, apparently NASCAR, because of this fear about an alleged split that obviously has not happened yet, but there were rumors several years ago about the Race Team Alliance, the RTA, threatening some sort of breakaway series. And obviously these were just empty threats, or at least at the time they appeared to be empty threats. But NASCAR was apparently taking them seriously and had plans on what they were going to do in the event that happened. And one of those plans allegedly was the idea of buying out all of Speedway Motorsports so that they would own all of the tracks on the schedule, except for Pocono, and as well as, because I say except for Pocono, they also wanted to acquire a stake in Indianapolis Motor Speedway. That was their plan. So they were basically saying, okay, we're going to take care of all of the tracks so that any breakaway series that would ever potentially hypothetically happen can't happen. Very, very concerning, especially in an antitrust lawsuit for obvious reasons. And it also appears as though the Gen 7 might have been a direct response to that threat because, remember, the Gen 7 is made primarily of proprietary parts. In the event of a hypothetical split, it was rumored, or at least threatened by the RTA, that they would take Gen 6 Cup cars and race them on their own. Well, the Gen 7 has all of these proprietary parts that NASCAR owns the intellectual rights to, which means that any team could not take this Gen 7 car and go race it outside of NASCAR sanction. So it seems as though this is all very concerning. Then you had earlier this week Dan Tauris, who has an interest in Spire Motorsports, basically saying, who are we dealing with? We wanted to support NASCAR. We wanted to see how we could support NASCAR as having been one of the teams that did sign the charter agreement. And then this comes out and it's like you tell us one thing in person and then you go and say another thing behind our back. Who are we dealing with? Very, very crazy things going on right now in the world of NASCAR. If you're following this, again, I appreciate you hanging in there with us on what's going on, but I do recommend reading that Matt Weaver article if you do have a chance. Now, we do have to move along here real quick, but with this, not without getting to our last piece of lawsuit news regarding this. It was announced on Wednesday today that a federal judge has denied 2311/FRM's preliminary injunction motion, meaning that they will finish out the season as open teams, and it is still expected that this thing is going to go to trial in December. Let's reflect on that for a hot minute, and now let's go ahead and also move on to the next piece of news, which is again connected to the lawsuit news. I know, it's crazy. The Charlotte Observer has reported that NASCAR's Commissioner Steve Phelps said that the 13 teams that did sign the charter agreement would benefit from the judge's ruling because Phelps said the teams could get, quote, an average additional payment of approximately $1.5 million per charter, since they will not have to pay out money to those 6 charters that are owned by 2311 and FRM. Okay. That's it for the lawsuit, I promise. That's the last piece of lawsuit news. Now let's get to something that may make you happy, may make you upset, may make you have mixed feelings. NASCAR's Managing Director of Communications, Mike Ford, said on Hauler Talk that NASCAR could reevaluate the rules for the fastest lap by making only the lead lap cars eligible. Now, this comes directly in response to Josh Berry going out there last week at Darlington and running around basically multiple laps down, trying to get the fastest lap to at the very least get a bonus point to help him in the playoffs. This is something that, again, I was surprised NASCAR didn't have a caveat in there when this rule was announced, because, again, the same thing happened to Formula One. If you remember, when Formula One introduced the fastest lap an additional point for the fastest lap, you had a lot of drivers who were just out of the points that would pit late in the race for a set of softs and then go out there and try and hot lap the last 5 or 6 laps and try and get the fastest lap in order to, at the very least, get 1 point. NASCAR did not learn from what Formula One did, which when they altered their rule and said, okay, now only points-scoring drivers can earn the point for the fastest lap, NASCAR still says, yeah, sure, why not? The last place car could earn the fastest lap. Why not? Is what it is. Again, it's just a rumor. It's just being discussed. It's not been confirmed, or even it is at this point, it's not even past the drawing board phase, so maybe don't freak out about it too much if you like that rule, but just something to be aware of going forward. Meanwhile, Adam Stern of Sports Business Journal reported that NASCAR apparently left Portland off its 2026 schedule because the track was in dire need of significant upgrades, including track Wi-Fi, which I feel like it's probably important to have Wi-Fi around the track, especially when you're trying to communicate with people back in Charlotte, and probably don't want to incur large data charges. Just interesting news there. Finally, a piece of news here, sending our best wishes to actor turned racer Frankie Muniz, who missed the Darlington truck race after he fell off a ladder at home and suffered a distal radius fracture in his wrist. A timetable for his return is currently unknown, but we are wishing the best for Frankie. Obviously, he's getting ready for that Malcolm in the Middle reboot coming out here pretty soon, but he's also running the full Truck Series schedule. But unfortunately, he missed Darlington because of an injury while just doing housework. Apparently that's more dangerous than racing a NASCAR truck nowadays. Anyway, I digress. Anyway, we've got to take our final break here real quick, but when we come back, we'll recap the races that happened this weekend and get you ready for all of the races that are coming up this next weekend. So don't go anywhere. You are watching The Racing Report. And welcome back to The Racing Report. My name is Rob Peeters. So glad to have you back here after the commercial break. Let's go ahead and recap the weekend. The Truck Series kicked off their playoffs this past weekend at Darlington. Corey Heim was the victor there. You had a late race caution flag that kind of took Lane Riggs out of the contention, even though he was there. He had a problem with the car as well. But Corey Heim obviously getting another victory there, proving once again why he's the favorite to win the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series Championship this year. Meanwhile, later that day, the Xfinity Series did run their last scheduled race for the foreseeable future at the Portland International Raceway. That was an insanely bonkers race that, if you saw it, Connor Zilisch made a 200 IQ move by just completely blowing through the chicane and doing whatever he's got to do in order to avoid a penalty, while all hell broke loose behind him, and he survived and ended up winning the race. He did exactly what he probably could have done and should have done in order to avoid that. And obviously, he took special precautions when getting out of the car to make sure he didn't slip and fall again after that tumble at Watkins Glen. Meanwhile, the next race that happened was early morning on Sunday. You had the Dutch Grand Prix coming, Formula One. Lots of craziness happening. Lewis Hamilton out early in the race. Then you had the big crash between Antonelli and Charles Leclerc, which took him out. That was very disappointing. Me personally, I think Antonelli did deserve that penalty and was maybe racing a little bit too hard with Leclerc there. But also at the same time, I understand Leclerc's frustration, because did he really need to pit? It is what it is. It's a Ferrari strategy. You get what you get. I'm sorry, bud. But anyway, and then you thought Lando Norris was going to make a charge at his teammate there, Oscar Piastri, until his engine gave way, and that allowed Isaac Hadjar to take the final podium spot, earning his first ever Formula One podium. Congratulations to him. So Piastri, Verstappen, and then Hadjar rounded out the podium, and Zandvoort. Meanwhile, then, IndyCar was in Nashville. I was there. If you take a look at some of my social media, you can see some of the pictures and videos that I took while I was there. Great race, fantastic event overall, great concert. Hey, the All-American Rejects were playing a concert there. They are incredible to see live. Highly recommended if you haven't ever seen the All-American Rejects live, and if you are a millennial like me who enjoys pop punk music, you definitely will like. Will probably be very envious of being there. But Joseph Newgarden finally got that victory that had been eluding him all year, finally got that victory. It was a thriller, lots of crazy things happening. Obviously, Christian Rasmussen crashing on the first lap, the most recent race winner at the time, crashing on the first lap. Then you had David Malukas crashing while running second after contact with the lap-down car of Louis Foster. And then Pato O'Ward cutting a tire and hitting the wall while leading. And that wasn't the only tire that was cut. Alex Palou cut a tire while he was leading early in the race and had to make an emergency pit stop. Thankfully, didn't hit anything. Incredible, immaculate car control there. Knew exactly what was going on. Hit pit lane. Thankfully, it was right at the start of the pit window, so he didn't lose much time. Still ended up coming out third there, and then ended up finishing second in the race. Good for him. McLaughlin finished third, and Kiffin Simpson got his best career oval finish there in fourth. Louis Foster was named Rookie of the Year after Robert Schwartzman was penalized for a block on Santino Ferrucci late in the race on the final restart. Very disappointing end to Schwartzman's race. Had been running more or less between top 15 and top 10 most of the race. Not exactly how he wanted things to go, but is what it is. Then NASCAR, the Southern 500 was in Darlington, and Chase Briscoe won his second straight Southern 500 on Sunday. One heck of a battle. Unfortunately, Dirty Air kind of reared its ugly head there. We had about 3 cars under a blanket there with Chase Briscoe, Tyler Reddick, and Eric Jones. Eric Jones was going for his third Southern 500 victory. Meanwhile, his teammate, John Hunter Nemechek, scored one of his best finishes all year when he finished fourth just behind. So great run for those Legacy Motor Club guys, but Chase Briscoe has locked himself into the next round of the playoffs. Meanwhile, Hendrick drivers Kyle Larson and Alex Bowman had a bit rough, very rough goes of it. Not as bad as Josh Berry, who spun and crashed on the first lap after starting in the front. Not exactly how you want your first race of the playoffs go, especially when Josh Berry is in the playoffs. It just got crazier from there. Just a lot of things going on in that Southern 500. So definitely a lot going on there. But now we move on into the races coming up this weekend. We've got the NASCAR Cup Series and the Xfinity Series in Gateway. The Truck Series, of course, is off until the week after that when they go to Bristol. And then Formula One has the Italian Grand Prix at Monza. Always a fantastic event. Who doesn't love a good old-fashioned race at Monza? A fast, high-speed race at Monza. Gotta love it. Looking forward to that. Supercars is back also next week. They're going to the Bend for their next race as we get closer to the finals of Supercars. So that is it for this week's episode of the Racing Report. Thank you again so much for watching this show today. Again, be sure if you liked it to follow me on social media at rpeeters33. That's RPEETERS 33. And then as always, please be sure to have that WTHR Plus app installed for the latest episodes of the Racing Report each and every week. So for WTHR Plus, my name is Rob Peeters, and this has been the Racing Report.